Good morning, everyone. I'm Rajeshri, the principal of ERNDCI Institute of Technology. In the webinar series on embedded systems development and its applications, we are on, I think, the fourth or fifth session today with introduction to deep learning and its hardware accelerators. So, let me first welcome all the participants across various parts of the country, and also the presenter Asif Salim. Asif is a research scholar, PhD, IIST at IIST Trivandrum. IIST is Indian Institute of Space Technology. The profile, further details of Asif would be like he had completed his ECE from Rajiv Gandhi Institute of Technology, Kottayam, Kerala. His MTech in Machine Learning and Computing from Indian Institute of Technology, Indian Institute of Space Science and Technology, that's IIST, and he is now currently a PhD scholar in Machine Learning in IIST. His interest areas include deep learning, learning in graphs, topological data analysis, etc. So, on behalf of ERNDSCI, I extend a warm welcome to you. For those participants who are not aware, ERNDCIT is the academic arm of CDAC Trivandrum, and we are currently running two MTech programs, MTech VLSI and Embedded Systems, and Cyber Forensics and Information Security. So this session is hosted by the VLSI and Embedded Systems team of CDAC Trivandrum. And on behalf of CDAC Trivandrum, ERNDCI, I welcome all the participants also on board, and also a special word of thanks to Asif for sparing time, for making time to share his knowledge to all the participants. So I hope all of you have a wonderful session ahead. Stay healthy and have an enriching experience today. Asif, I think you can start.
Okay, thank you, ma'am, for your introduction. And I would also like to thank ER and DCIT for giving me this opportunity. So I think I will share my screen first. So we have two parts. First part is about introduction to deep learning, and the second part is about introduction to its accelerators. So I will tell my agenda of this first part. First, we will discuss about machine learning, and most part of the discussion then follows about a single neuron. So, in neural networks, I hope you know the difference between deep learning and neural networks. Neural networks is the general set, and deep learning comes under that. Means if you have a very large layered neural network, means very deep layers if you have inside that, we call it a deep learning network. Okay, so my idea is to discuss about a single neuron, what happens with a single neuron, what is its peculiarity, what it can do, and what are its limitations. Those things we will discuss in detail, and after that you will get an intuition or idea why we are going for a deep neural network. And we will discuss convolutional neural networks also briefly after that. Okay, so I'm starting. So first, let's see what is machine learning. So machine learning is an area, or it is a set of computer algorithms that takes a data set and gives me a function that has to be learned from that data. For example, as you can see in the block diagram, your data may have an input and a corresponding output. Then this machine learning algorithm takes in this data set and it will give a function f. Okay, so the purpose of this function is that it should take the input data x and it should give me the output y. Okay, that is the purpose of the function. And we have several sorts of categories of learning. First one is supervised learning. If y is given to the algorithm, I mean, that is the normal setting. We assume that a data x is there and its corresponding output y is there. And if both are fed into that, we call it supervised learning. The reason is output y acts as a supervisor for the algorithm to learn. Hence, that name supervised learning. And unsupervised learning is the kind of learning where Y is absent. For example, for dimensionality reduction of the data or to do the clustering of the data, we actually don't have a notion of output, right? So that's why we call it unsupervised learning. And we have a mix of both, semi-supervised learning. In that case, output corresponding to some X are known and some are unknown. So example is semi-supervised classification. And we will see an example of semi-supervised learning first, and it is a classification problem. Okay, so classification problem means we have a data. This in that figure, the circles and triangles, they are some part of the data. Okay, and the output of the data is the information whether they belong to the circle category or triangle category. So I call it class A and class B. Remember, that is the output information in which class it belongs. And the coordinates of the data is what we generally assume as data. Okay, so in this particular problem, our data points are grouped into two classes, and our objective is to find a function that takes this data as input, and it should give me the output in which class that data belongs. And with the new function, if I find such a function, I can find the class of any data that arises in the future. Okay, an example case is a function that takes our body parameters and tells whether a person has cancer or not. So if I have such a data set, assume that maybe from our medical college, I got a data set of cancer patients and they have certain body parameters. And from that input, I will also have a data of normal patients as well. So with this data set, I will make a function that takes in body parameters and it gives the output whether that person has a cancer or not. That's an example. Okay. So for any machine learning algorithm, the process consists of training and inference or testing. So this notion is very important for us to understand the different applications of hardware accelerators as well. Because training is the process of building a machine learning algorithm, and that is the most difficult task for us in terms of computation. Most of the computation is focused on training the data. And inference or testing is just applying that trained model or the function we have learned to a new testing case or a future data. That is what we call inference or testing. Okay. And we are coming to neural networks. So in the graph, there is a simple neural network as well as deep neural networks are there. The difference, as I told you earlier, is that in deep neural network there will be multiple layers will be there, and in a simple neural network we usually assume that there is only one hidden layer. So you can see that the red dots are the input layer, and the yellow dots are hidden layer, and blue dots are output layer. Okay, so it is a network of a large collection of neurons arranged in layers, and it is inspired from the structure of human brain. So like in human brain, each neuron is connected to every other neurons in the next layer. And what is the objective of such a network? So earlier we told about a function, right? The purpose of machine learning algorithm is to learn a function from the given data. So the same thing, the purpose of neural network is to approximate the function that maps the input to output. So that term approximate is very crucial, because the reason is we cannot find the exact function that maps the input to output. What we are finding is a proxy function of that original function, and hence it will only be an approximation. Okay. If you have any doubt, you can interrupt me in between. Okay. So now we are going to the case of a single neuron. Remember that each of these yellow dots and blue dots, they do some operation. Okay, so each of this dot is a single neuron, and this red dot we usually call input layer. Nothing happens there. It only inputs the data, coming data. It will only feed the data into the network. So by neurons, we usually means these yellow dots and blue dots. Okay. So what is happening in a single neuron? So as you can see in this graph, I assume that a d-dimensional, small d dimensional data is coming into the neuron, x1 to xd, like you can see here, and each of the data coordinates or data component is associated with a weight W1 to WD. Okay. And there is also a time bias which is notated by B. It is nothing but a constant being added to the operation A of X, like a fine tuning. Okay. So we have to be familiar with certain time first. First one is neuron pre-activation or input activation. So that we notate it by A of X. And what it computes, this neuron computes is like, first it will take the dot product of this X vector and this W vector, W transpose X. Then this constant B will be added. And W1 to WD are called connection weights. This is, I mean, when we are learning a neural network, the first thing we are doing, I mean, the thing we are doing is to find the appropriate weights, W1 to WD. So it cannot be any random thing. There is a precise set of, precise combination of weights that gives me the function that has to be learned. Okay. So always remember that by a neural network training, our objective is to find what are the correct connection weights, or we can say the output of the algorithm is the connection weights. Okay. Then that is the input that is coming to the neuron here in this lower part of the circle, and there is an output here. I have not shown it. The output is just a function of this input. So that function G, we call it as activation function. So the input is dot product of the weight vector and the input vector plus a constant. Output is a function of that quantity, G of A of X. Okay. And what is the geometrical interpretation of this single neuron? So for that, I assume that this activation function is sigmoid function. Sigmoid function means G of X equals 1 by 1 plus e raised to minus W transpose X. Okay. So earlier I have told that the input to the neuron is this B plus W transpose X. So if when I choose sigmoid, what is the change happening to W transpose X? It will convert it to 1 by 1 plus e to the power minus W transpose X. Okay. And when if we plot that function, we can see that the output ranges between 0 and 1. Means whatever be the input you are giving in the real line, it will squash that input to that range 0 and 1. Okay. So what is the use with such a function form? So earlier we told about a classification case, right? I want to classify this data to class A or class B. So if I apply that input to this function, and if I make a rule like this, like you can see here, if g of x is greater than 0.5, I can assign it to class A, and vice versa. So this 0.5 is just a threshold, so it can be any value between that 0 and 1. Okay, so that is the use with a single neuron, right? we were talking about a single neuron. We talked about what is the input activation, and we told about this function g when it takes the form of a sigmoid function, right? And in that case, we came to the observation that it can be used to classify a data point into two, right? Precisely a binary classification, right? So that exactly what a single neuron do. A neuron with this sigmoid activation is a binary classifier. And you just imagine what a single neuron, what is its power? A single neuron can classify a large volume of data, and it can classify whether it belongs to this class or that class. And yeah, if you are familiar with logistic regression classifier, it is exactly that. I mean, a single neuron is exactly what a logistic regression classifier do. Okay, so once we plot that function, I assume that our data is two-dimensional, x1 and x2. And if I plot the output of this sigmoid function g, and we can see that it takes the form of a roof, right? A step kind of shape. So this ridge here, I mean the separation between that lower and upper region, that acts as a decision function. This term is crucial. So this is the function we want to learn, and it takes a decision. That's why the name decision function. So that ridge acts as a decision function that separates the data points lying in the upper and lower regions, right? So that's why we call that a single neuron is a binary classifier. That's the takeaway from, I mean, till here, that's the takeaway. A single neuron is a binary classifier, okay? Now, what is the exact algorithm how we are going to learn the weights W, and the algorithm is called backpropagation algorithm, and this algorithm we are now going to discuss is for this single neuron only. Remember that in practice it is not the single neuron. It is a set of neurons arranged in different layers. Okay, so keep in mind in the rest of the discussion that we are only talking with respect to a single neuron, but in practice this is the case. So to learn the weights for the algorithm, we assume that there are m number of data points are there, means xi, yi, I ranges from 1 to m, and I assume that xi belongs to Rn or an n-dimensional space. And what is the output? Output is neural network weights. W is in same dimension as our data in Rn, and the bias p. I forgot to tell about the bias. What is the significance of bias? So as you can see in the figure, if I want to translate this means in this direction, that is what B do. So if I increase the B, this entire thing will move towards one direction, and if I take the opposite sign of B, it will go in the reverse direction. So it is a kind of fine tuning we are applying to the learned weights. So that is the purpose of bias. Okay. So as part of the algorithm, we first initialize the weight W. I will tell in a general, I will summarize first what we are going to do. So first, I will initialize with a random values for W. Okay. Then I will take each data point. I will find out what is the output of the neuron. Like I told you that it is 1 by 1 plus e raised to minus W transpose X. And I also know the actual output of this exercise, right? Because my data point also contains the output YIs. And I will compare what is the error, how much is the error, because G is the output given by neural network, YI is my actual output. So what is this error? I will compute that. Then I will update the weight with respect to this error. So my objective is to minimize this error E, and this error E is a function of G, which is a function of this weight vectors W1 to Wn, and each component of the W will be updated by taking, I mean, we are just applying gradient descent only. Okay, no fancy optimization algorithms has been applied here. Only gradient descent. In gradient descent, we will take the first derivative with respect to each Wj, and we will compute a fraction of that weight determined by this hyperparameter alpha, and by that we will update the weight. Similarly, we will update the bias. Okay. So we will come in detail. So first we will initialize with some random values of W, which is not obviously our correct W we want, right? So we want to find out the correct value of W. So we will do a process until convergence. What is that process? For each data point M, remember that M is the total number of data points. And for that, first we calculate the input activation A for the ith data point, then we calculate the output corresponding to that data point. We will calculate the error, and we will take the derivative of this error with respect to each of the Wj from 1 to n, and I will update the weight based on this equation. Remember that alpha is a hyperparameter. I mean, it means it can be a very small value. I mean, we cannot give the entire gradient as the update, because it affects the stability of that mathematical optimization problem. So we will apply only a fraction of that derivative, and similarly we will update B. We repeat this entire process for all the data points. And what is the second step means? It means that applying all of this data point for a single time is not enough for us to learn. We have to apply the data point multiple times. So that's what that repeat until convergence means. And I have also written what are the exact values of that derivatives. And like I told you, for convergent data has to be fed multiple times. And number of times we feed this data, we call it as epoch. Okay. Okay, although we told that a neuron is able to do a binary classification, there are some issues with it. So first one is the capacity. So we define the capacity of a neuron like this. Complexity of the computation a neuron can perform. So what if we want to do some non-linear classification? For example, to classify this XOR operation means I want a function that tells me, I mean, that takes the input and give me whether it belongs to this 0 or this triangle. Okay. So in that case, how can I do that operation? I need two distant functions, right? Means to separate this 0, this dot, I need a distant function like here. I mean, that tells me that this is a separation, and I also need another here that tells me this is also a separation. So this kind of thing a neuron cannot do. A single neuron, it is not possible to do. In other words, these are the kind of classification. I mean, these three examples are the kind of classification a single neuron can do. So that means it perform well in the case of linearly separable cases. So linearly separable cases means I can classify these data points with a single linear line. Means in 2 dimension with a, that means it's a straight line, and in multi-dimension it will be a hyperplane. So if I can divide the data with only a single line or a hyperplane, I will call it as linearly separable cases. But this, in practice, this is not the case. So our data is mostly non-linear. I need a non-linear decision. I mean, instead of this single straight line, I may be requiring a very complex non-linear curve to do the classification. So that is our real world data is like. So a single neuron in that case is not enough, right? So what we have to do, obviously the solution is like we shall add more number of neurons. So what happens if we add more number of neurons? So let's add a single neuron, okay? Means one more neuron. So now we have two neurons. Okay, we are going to discuss this case. I have two neurons here and here, and the output of those two neurons I will feed it into a third neuron. So instead of having one neuron now, I have three neurons, and the problem I am going to solve is like a problem like this. So the data is like some rating of some movies, a collection of movies by two reviewers, John and Mary. Okay. So this X means maybe that movie is bad. Zero means the movie is good. So each dot and X in this point is a movie. Okay. So now my objective is to find a function based on it takes the input of Mary's rating and John's rating. That function will take them as input, and it shall give me the output of the movie is good or bad. Okay, that is my objective. And for that, you can see that to do that classification, I need a function here. So I hope you can see the mouse cursor. This a function, a line here, a separating line here, as well as a separating line here. So these two separating lines or these two separate decision function is required for me to do this particular problem. Now, how I am able to do that? So it is like I will add. I will add more neurons. Okay, so precisely the step is like we partition the data into two steps. Means this is the first step where this lower portion is removed. Okay, in the first step, and I will learn a classifier there, and then I will remove this upper portion as the second step, and with that data alone, I will learn the second classifier. Means two neurons I require, right? And why I require the third neuron? The things learned by these two neurons, the first neuron here and second neuron here, has to be combined to make the final decision, right? And for that purpose, I will put third neuron. So, uh, so that is what a two neuron is able to do. And in this case, these thetas are our weights. Earlier I used the W value, and W1, W2 is the weights to the output of this neuron. I mean, out to the output neuron. And B and C's are the biases, B1, B2, and C are the biases. Okay. And let's see the geometrical interpretation of this particular model. So as you can see here, so I have two inputs are there, John's rating and Mary's rating, and I have two neurons here, this one and this one, and biases also. So this bias is applied to all neurons, and remember that it can be different. I mean, it can be different for different neurons, and this is the output neuron. And see what is happening. This first neuron is learning a decision function like this. Okay, second neuron is learning a decision function like this, and these graphs are in scale. Okay, and if we combine these two, what we will get? We will get a decision surface like this. First there is a lower region, then there is an upper region, and after some point that upper region again goes down and it will go to the lower region. This is exactly what we want. Our data looks like this, right? See, this is my lower part of that figure, and the region where these x's lie, it is the upper part of that region, and again the remaining zeros, they are the second lower part. See, so I hope you can connect the shape with the data distribution. Okay, so what we infer from here, what is that? With a single neuron, I am not able to do uh, a non-linear classification. That's the first thing you have to take. The second thing is, to solve that problem, I need more neurons, and we saw when we add two more neurons, we can solve that issue. And again, I will tell you, the our uh, real world data is very complex. I mean, this is an example of a complex function in the real world case. So that means this R1 and R2 are the region corresponding to the class. So in real world data, there will be a R2 region inside R1, and again inside that there will be another R1 region. Remember that this R1 and R2 corresponds to different classes. So, and the data is of thousands of dimensions. Suppose we are processing with the image is our data input. So that means a 224 by 224 by 224, that much number of dimension the data spans, and the neural network has to learn from such a very big data space. So it is really difficult. I mean, the point is that my point is we cannot manage with two or three neurons. Sometimes we have to go for a very large number of neurons arranged in multiple layers like this. And connected with this, I will show one neural network, one convolutional neural network architecture. Okay, this is one neural network that has been made to process the image. So it contains 60 million parameters, means 60 million number of weights has to be learned for this particular architecture. That takes one input here, 224 by 3 RGB image, and to do a classification among 1,000 cases. Okay, just imagine I have an image and I want to assign it to a class. For that class, I have 1,000 options. For example, it can be a dog, cat, car, bicycle, like this. And to take that decision, how much number of weights do I require? That amount is huge, 16 million, right? So and that, and connected with this, I will also tell what is the need for hardware acceleration. I think you may be getting an idea from this. So in order to process this 60 million, I require 2 gigabytes per second, like that. So if much computation in a CPU, it will take a huge amount of time, and it will not be feasible. Data set may contain millions of images. For example, this particular neural network is built on a data set that contains 12 million images. So to process this 12 million images with 60 million parameters in a CPU is impossible. We cannot do that. It will take years. So that's why we need some acceleration to do these computations. So we will discuss in detail about these things in the second part. Okay, now universal approximation theorem. So this is a very important theorem related with neural network. So it says that a feed-forward network means just the network we have seen with a single hidden layer containing a finite number of neurons can approximate arbitrary, well real-valued continuous function on compact subsets of Rn. So that means if I am supplied with hundreds and thousands of neurons with just only one layer itself, I can uh, approximate any function. So that is in contrast with what I have told you earlier, right? But in practice, this is not computationally feasible as it results in large number of parameters, and with less number of parameters arranged in multiple layers, neurons with arranged in multiple layers, we the same task we may be able to do with few hundred number of neurons, okay, arranged in multiple layers. And why we are going for this multiple layers? Actually, it is inspired from our visual cortex region of human brain, and it has been found that we humans process the visuals that is being fed into our eyes in this multiple levels of hierarchy. So I will tell about what is that hierarchy later. Okay. So now the intuition behind the deep neural network is clear, right? So just imagine I have added a few more number of neurons here. So first neuron learns a decision function like this, second one like this, and third one, fourth one like this. So in summary, we can find complex decision functions by a stacked arrangement of individual neurons in multiple hidden layers. Okay, that's the first point. Second point is learning. What is the constraint? Is there any condition to do this learning? There is one. We told about activation function, right? So that activation function has to be differentiable, and backpropagation algorithm is used to learn the parameter. So I will tell a few more words about backpropagation algorithm. So we saw it in the case of a single neuron, right? And what is the only condition for the neural network? This activation function G has to be differentiable, right? Why it has to be differentiable? Because it when we update the weight, we want to take the derivative of the error, which is again a function of this activation function. So to take the derivative, this has to be differentiable. And why is the name back propagation? I will also briefly tell about that. See, we saw the algorithm in the case of a single neuron only. But imagine if you have a deep neural network like this. So to update the weights in this first layer, what I have to do? My error, the quantity which I am optimizing, the error or loss function, lies in the output layer, right? So this derivative of this output function in terms of this first weights, I mean first layer weights, I have to do it in terms of the weights of the remaining layer as well, right? So means imagine you are writing a output function. So it will contain, it will be a function in terms of weights in this layer and this layer, and finally to this layer. So if I want to differentiate the weights in the first layer, I have to differentiate this like in a function of a function manner. Means first I have to take the derivative with respect to the weights in this layer, then that will be a function of weight in this layer. So again I have to take the derivative of the weight with respect to this layer's weight, and likewise I have to go backwards direction. That's why we call it back propagation algorithm. And there is one more thing. So in the neural network training, there are two phases are there. First one is forward propagation, means up to the process we calculate the error. Means first three steps here is the forward propagation. And when we update the weight, like I have told you, we have to go in a backward direction, right? So that will be backward propagation. So remember that first three step is forward propagation, next two is backward propagation. Okay, that's what I planned as an introduction to deep neural networks, and we will also discuss, briefly discuss what is convolutional neural network. So this is a particular type of network that has been built to work on images. Okay. So I will first explain what is a convolution operation, and it is the same as in the signal processing domain. What we mean by convolution of two signals, that is exactly what we do. So I think I will start from here. So the working principle I have summarized in 5 steps. So the first step is CNN layers parameters contain consists of a set of learnable filters. Every filter is small spatially but extends through the full depth of volume. We will discuss, don't worry, we will discuss everything in detail. And during the forward pass, we slide each filter across the width and height of the input volume, producing a two-dimensional activation map. So let's see what is this first two steps. So in this case, I have assumed that a image which is of dimension 7 cross 3. Okay. So now we are talking about certain filters here, right? The convolution filters. So this is the weights of these filters is the thing we want to learn by applying backpropagation on this algorithm. Okay. And for that, I assume that first filter is like this. I just initialize the weight like this. Okay. These values I have taken at random. And what is this dimensional activation map, right? So what does that mean? So remember that there are three layers are there in the input volume, and our filter will also have three layers. Okay, and the filter will be usually a subset of the image. I mean, its dimension will be a subset of the dimension of the images. So here I assume the filter is 3 cross 3 cross 3, and what I am doing, the first layer of the weight is multiplied with first layer of the input image. Similarly, second layer is multiplied with second one. Third one is multiplied with third one. Remember that element-wise multiplication we are doing, and we will finally add all the values. For example, this is another filter. Okay, for the time being, you forget about this filter. So this 2 is the result of element-wise multiplication of all these quantities. Means for the first filter, first layer, 0 into -1 plus 0 into 1 plus 0 into 0. Likewise, till here, if you compute that, that quantity will be 2. So that will be the output volume in this coordinate. So likewise, if I take another position, for example, this position here, so that will be the element-wise multiplication added together. It will give me 4 here. Okay. So if so that means we are convolving this filter across the image. So first I will convolve the image with the first 3 columns. Then I will take one more step. I will take second, third, and fourth column, and I will get the value 7. Likewise, I am like we do in the signal processing convolution, I am moving this filter across the image up and down, in the direction up and down. Okay, so that's why the name convolution. And one more filter we have, right? And if I apply that filter and do the same process, I will get the second layer, second channel of my output volume. Okay, so this is what a convolution operation means. Okay, then what is the third step? So as we slide the filter across the input, we are computing the dot product between the entries of the filter and input, like we have seen. And the network will learn filters that activate when they see some specific type of feature at some spatial position of the input. Okay, why we are doing this? The idea is that each filter will learn some unique things. For example, this is the filters of a convolutional neural network. So the lower row is the filters that is learned in the first layer, and the second row is some filters learned in some mid layers of that network, and this is the things the filter learned in the final layer. Okay, so you can see that the first column is the case of maybe some facial recognition. Okay, so in the first filters in the first layer of the network, remember there are multiple layers are there, and each layer can have its own filters. So The first filter learned certain edges, right? Certain edges and dots. And the second layer, it is like a hierarchy. Remember, I told you about the hierarchy. So in the subsequent layers, it is learning a much more generalized feature, like individual organs, eyes and nose. And in the third, towards the final layer, the filters are learning the entire facial features, right? So similar is the case of cars, elephants, and chairs. So that's what we are discussing here as the fourth point. The network will learn filters that activate when they see some specific type of feature at some spatial position. So the spatial position, it is actually independent of the spatial position. So important peculiarity of CNN, we will discuss that. It is called translational invariance. Okay, and what's the final point? Stacking these activation maps for all the filters along the depth dimension forms the full output volume, right? So what happened to our example case? Our input was 7 cross 7 cross 3, and I applied two filters here. Hence, the depth will be 2, and the other dimension is determined by how we convolve. How we slide these filters across the images. For example, in this case, the sliding happened. The second quantity one happened with columns 2, 3, and 4. So I can, that is a parameter. I can skip one column and I can do that with third, fourth, and fifth column as well. So based on that sliding and the skipping of sliding, this volume, the first two dimension of the volume, output volume changes. But always remember that the final final coordinate of the volume, it will be the number of filters. Okay. And as we told, we have a large data volumes will happen in subsequent layers, right? So each time it will results in more convolution and very large parameters to learn. So that can be a problem, right? So for a solution, we apply pooling. Pooling operation is like this. So after the convolution operation, I will downsample the image size. Okay. So for example, this is a max pooling operation of a single channel of some input. So the first 4 column I will take and I will compute the maximum value. That I will take as the output. First coordinate of the output. Similarly, the other values. So in this way, I am downsampling the image size to half, right? So this is what we do in convolutional neural network. First, I apply convolution, and in the convolution, we are learning the weights, right? And these weights can be applied to an activation function as well, right? Remember that our activation function, I hope you remember, in the case of single neuron, the output can be a function of the inputs, right? So the same thing can be applied to the weights of convolution layers as well. So finally, a CNN looks like this. So it will be a combination of alternate, and there is no specific order. I can do 2 convolution, then pooling, or vice versa. So there is no specific order like that. And you may be wondering how we will get to the output, right? So as you can see here, this is a neural network architecture called AlexNet. And as you can see here, convolution is done in 2 stages, right? The first blocks will do convolution over some region, some portions of this image, and for the remaining portions of the image, another set of convolution blocks are happening. And our output volume will be, in this case, will be 13 cross 128. So I'm going to convert this into a normal neural network like we have seen earlier, right? For that, what I'm going to do is like I will vectorize every quantity in this 13 cross 128 matrix, right? Basically, it is a matrix, right? So that 13 rows, 128 matrix is converted to a column matrix. That is what this 2048 means. So from here onwards, this process is called flattening, and this layer we call it as dense because dense layers means we have a linear. I mean, there is no volumes. I mean, neurons are not arranged in volumes, but as layers we have seen earlier. That is what dense layers mean. So from here onwards, it is a normal neural network we have seen with 1,000 output neurons, and each output neurons, whichever quantity that is highest. For example, if 500 the neuron is giving me more value, I will assign it to that class. It may be corresponding to the case of a cat or a car, something like that. Okay. So that is what SENN looks like. And in summary, it is translation invariant. That see, I mean, if you want to describe the philosophy of CNN in a one or two word, that is the word translation invariant. Features are identified by the algorithm irrespective of the location which appears, and it's a powerful deep architecture. It can be also used in the case of audio processing and any time series data as well. And it is a automated feature extraction. That is another important point. For example, if you know the SIFT algorithm, we are doing certain process, everything is manual. But in this case, what we are doing, we are literally we are doing only the initialization of this weight, right? The initial values for these weights, and from there onwards, the process is automated. We run the back propagation and forward propagation and backward propagation multiple times. That process is automated, and we are not involving any handcrafted features into that as well. But remember that it has lots of parameters involved, and training consumes a lot of time. Okay, with that, I would like to conclude the first session. So our second part is about hardware accelerators for deep learning. Okay. So introduction, it is like I mean we use the term deep learning, AI, and machine learning together, right? Sometimes it is used in the same sense. An AI accelerator is a class of specialized hardware accelerator or computer system designed to accelerate AI applications, especially artificial neural networks and machine vision. So I will start with a brief introduction of AI acceleration. So in 1991, there was developed a CMOS accelerator for OCR, and similarly some DSP process for the same purpose. And in 1995, we had several attempts to create high parallel throughput systems for workstation, including neural network simulation. And in 1996, it came the first FPGA acceleration of a neural network called Hopfield network. It's like a memory association network. Okay. It's a very simple thing to implement. Uh, so that was in 1996. Remember that the era of deep learning actually starts after 2010 or 2005. And in 2006, we had these heterogeneous computing architectures such as Cell microprocessor, which had features overlapping with AI accelerators. And in 2000, CPUs gained increasingly wide SIMD units, and in 2000 it came the GPU. This was a crucial turning point for the deep learning area because GPU offered a very great acceleration compared to CPUs and all. And in 2015, from here onwards, you can see it is Google, Microsoft, IBM, Intel. All these big players are coming into picture after 2015. In 2015, Google made their TPU, which is a FPGA for much better acceleration than GPU. And Microsoft also introduced an FPGA chip in 2015. And in 2017, IBM announced an architecture in contrast to von Neumann architecture based on in-memory computing and phase change memory arrays. in 2018. This is a very ambitious project of Intel. Intel announced project with the aim of integrating FPGAs in server CPUs, which would be capable of AI acceleration. Okay. So why we need accelerators? So like I told you earlier, we have seen the AlexNet CNN, right? It has 60 million number of parameters, and it requires 1.5 billion operations per image. Similar to AlexNet, VGGNet is another CNN architecture. It consists of 138 million number of parameters, and it requires 30 gigabillion operations per second. Okay, and we cannot afford with latency in some cases like self-driving cars. You may be aware of the Tesla self-driving cars, right? And you can imagine just a delay of a fraction of second while driving can cause accidents, right? So in such applications, we cannot afford latency, even though it is very small. Okay. So first we will discuss about GPU. I'm not going in detail. So as you can, I think first I will discuss the difference between GPU and CPU. I think you may be knowing about all these things. So in CPU we have only few computing elements, and in GPU we have many. And in uh, when GPU have a lot of RAM and cache memories, it will be less in the case of GPU. Okay, so this is basically the difference. There will be a lot of processors inside GPU with less amount of memory, and with this architecture, you can guess that it can do many computations in parallel. That's the difference. So what makes GPU useful for AI acceleration are mainly these 2 points. Its highly parallel structure makes them more efficient than CPUs for algorithms that process large blocks of data in parallel. So large blocks of data in parallel, you can imagine. See, earlier we have seen the convolution operation, right? This convolution operation, there is no need to do it sequentially, right? We can apply convolution at any random position. All we have to take care of is that the corresponding convolution should be placed in that order only, right? That order doesn't matter. We can fill the output matrix in any order. I mean, the elements of the output matrix that it can be filled in any order, right? So inherently these convolutional neural networks and deep neural networks gives an option for parallel processing, and these GPUs have high memory bandwidth uh, and throughput due to efficient floating point matrix based operations. So remember that initially GPU stands for graphics processing unit. Initially it was built for processing the videos and all, but it was later only some researchers found that it is useful to do neural network operation. Then after that, the GPUs architectures, there were mainly two streams were there for video processing and for neural networks. The reason is that for neural networks we do not require very high precision. Even with low precision matrix multiplication, that will work. So based on that, there were two streams in GPU architectures were there. And just for an example, this is the example of a GPU architecture called GeForce 8800 GPU. So it contains, as you can see, it is arranged in 16 streaming multiprocessors. Okay, so each of this SM you can see here. There are 16 quantities are there, and it is arranged in 8 independent processing units called TPCs. So there are 8 TPCs are there, and total we have 128 streaming processors arranged in this way. So all of these processes are good to do this parallel computing. And the streaming processor array performs all GPU's programmable calculations, like we have discussed. And it have a scalable memory system consisting of external DRAM and fixed function ROPs that perform color and depth frame buffer operations. I mean, in neural network case, it will be our matrix multiplication, simply matrix multiplications. Okay, so and there is an interconnect of this ROP and RAM with L2 cache memory into the process. Okay, and they also have this compute work distribution unit, pixel work distribution unit, vectors work distribution, and all. And like I told you, it is built for video processing application, but it can be used for. I mean, basically, this video processing is a, operations of many matrix multiplications, right? And that is what we do in the case of neural networks as well. Okay, like I told you, it has an interconnection network here that carries computed pixel, fragment colors, and depth values from this SPA to ROPs. Network also routes texture memory read requests from SPA to DRAM and read data from DRAM through a level 2 cache. Okay. So I'm just briefly discussing that, and we have a comparison of GPU versus CPU. I think the important points we have discussed. And this point is important in the case of accelerators when you go for FPGA design, the final one. CPU emphasis on low latency, but GPU emphasis on high throughput. So that means this GPU have certain latency issues associated with it. Okay, so to solve that, we can go for FPGA, but it has certain advantages and disadvantages as well. And if you compare, sorry, and if you compare the runtime of GPU versus CPU, this case is for a neural network that has been run for 20 epochs, right? That means 20 times the entire data has been fed into the network. For a dual core CPU, it took 4 hours and 48 minutes. But see, in the case of a GPU, it took only 2 minutes. That is the difference between CPU and GPU. And as of now, in industry as well as academy, we are using GPUs as part of deep learning experiments, because GPUs are, I mean, it is although it is costly, our systems come with this inherent GPUs and all, right? With the PCI Express bus, you can connect a standalone GPU to your CPU, and it is very convenient to use like that. That is why we are using GPU commonly. And GPUs have certain cons. First, it will consume a large amount of power, and cloud service on large servers or in battery operated devices. Hence, it becomes a challenge. And GPU gain their performance from their ability to process a large image batch in parallel. For some applications like video stream, input images should be processed frame by frame. I think they are self-explanatory. But the biggest issue is its carbon footprint, like you can see in that figure. Uh, Training an AI model emits around 626 pounds of carbon dioxide, but compared with aircraft industry or vehicle industry, it is very low. Why this is very high? The reason is that see, these Google, Microsoft, all these companies have very large number of data servers are there, and for this data servers, the operation has to be fast, right? It need not be the reason. I mean, a neural network need not be the reason, but the other operation itself should be done very fast. And for that thing, this carbon dioxide emission is very high in that case. And we come to FPGA and ASIC. I think this is an introduction about FPGA and ASIC. I think I can skip it because the time is a bit, we are late. So why they are used as accelerators, or why they are a good candidate for accelerators? There are certain points about that. First one is these hardware accelerators have relatively limited memory input output bandwidths and computing resources compared with GPU, but it has been shown by researchers that they can achieve at least moderate performance with low power consumption. Even with these limited resources, if you compare the performance of GPU and CPU, I mean, sorry, GPU and FPGA and ASIC, in terms of the accuracy of the classification, there is no much difference still. So it has been shown like that. And the throughput of ASIC design can be improved by customizing memory hierarchy and assigning dedicated resources. Means see, each type of neural network have different requirements. For example, in CNN, we can see that although the convolution operation is there, the dimension of this convolution operation happening at different layers is different. And towards the end, if you remember, we have a dense layer like our normal neural network, right? We columnize the output volume to a single column vector, right? So in that area, it is altogether a different kind of computation. So these varying requirements of computation requirements associated with deep neural networks, ASIC designs have some room in it to handle those. So the disadvantage is the development cycle, cost, and flexibility are not satisfactory in ASIC-based acceleration. So it will take a large amount of time as well as cost to get a good accelerator in FPGAs. And it also has certain other advantages as well. FPGA structure is useful for neural networks in two sense. Uh, First point is feed forward. Remember that a neural network involves two processes: feed forward propagation and backward propagation. So it makes FPGAs offer a clear advantage as they can create customized hardware circuits that are deeply pipelined and inherently multi-threaded. So this multi-threading helps us to do this computation in parallel, this feed-forward computations in parallel, right? Similarly, the backward propagation as well. And the layer-by-layer structure of deep learning algorithms is also a very good point to use FPGAs for acceleration. The reason is FPGA have the capability of partial dynamic configuration, which allows part of the FPGA to be reconfigured while the rest is being used, right? So this could be of potential benefit to deep learning methods where the next layer could be reconfigured while the current layer is being used, right? So this is what is happening in neural network while we do the propagation, right? So we are doing layer by layer. So the layers that is getting processed is only getting changed, right? The uh, previous layers are all now fixed. So when we do that forward propagation, so this layer by layer operation can be done with FPGAs in a much more efficient manner. And the challenges are listed like this. So these FPGAs, these neural networks require a significant amount of storage, external memory bandwidth, and computational resources on the order of billions of operations per second. Example, we have seen the AlexNet have 60 million parameters, and it needs 250 MB of memory for storing these weights alone, based on 34-bit floating point, and it requires around 1.5 billion operations for each input image. So the volume, the data volume, and the operation that has to be done inside a neural network is much beyond the FPGA capability, right? Uh, and the second point is different layers in CNNs have different characteristics which result in different parallelism and memory access requirement. Like I have told you, the convolution layer itself have a large range of dimensions, and the dense layer have its own operation. The next point, the last point tells about that. Convolution layers are computational centric. Means for convolution, the main operations that is happening is in terms of computation and requires less amount of storage. But in the case of fully connected layers towards the end, the operations happening in those layers are less, but more memory requirements are there. The reason is that fully connected layers means each neuron is connected to every other neurons, right? So it results in a large number of connection weights. But in convolution layer, although the data volume it may seem large, but the the computations happening inside that is much more beyond that. Means for each filters we have to convolve across all image, right? So the number of operations required in that stage is huge compared with the memory requirement. Okay, so this is an example of Microsoft CNN accelerator that is being built on FPGA. So its peculiarity is like it have a multi-bank input buffer and a kernel weight buffer. They are used to provide an efficient buffering scheme of FMs and these neural networks weights respectively. Okay, and another important constraint about this hardware acceleration is that the memory traffic, because we want to access the data, right? The data may be huge, the data volume may be huge. Like I told you, for AlexNet, it is being built over 12 million images. And to store these 12 million images anyway, it is not possible. So what we are doing is like we will process the images in batches. Maybe I take the first 1,000 image, then the next 1,000 image like this. So even if it is 1,000 image, this data is being transferred back and forth in the neural network very frequently. So this data movement is a very crucial factor. That is why GPUs have a clear-cut advantage in these computations, because we have seen that it has a large sorry you have seen that it has a large high memory bandwidth and throughput is there for that. That is why GPU is very fast. Okay, then coming to this, to minimize this off-chip memory traffic, a special network on chip has been designed uh, to avoid transferring to the external memory. So this network on chip, this module, they have designed it to minimize this data transfer issues. And convolution operation and other CNN operations are independently performed using spatially distributed scalable vectors of this processing elements arrays. Okay. Then the control engine is responsible for streaming and data delivery of multi-bank input buffer and kernel weight buffer to the PE vectors. Okay. In addition, it supports configuring multiple CNN layers at a time. So that is also a very good advantage because CNN have, like I told, many layers are there. So if you can configure multiple layers at a time, it is good. And the results show that proposed design is able to classify 134 images per second while consuming only 25 watts. So this is a very good result. I mean, in terms of power consumption, this processing rate is very good. And another important thing is that we have told that in the neural network there are two stages are there: training and inferencing, right? So all these things, I mean, this FPGA we have discussed here is for inferencing. Means for the training the neural networks, uh, it has been done off shelf to this FPGA, and once the networks has been learned, those weights has been directly given to this FPGA memory, and it is then later used to classify the input images one by one. Okay, and imagine if you have to do the entire training process in FPGA, that's a very difficult task, and that is also the reason there are billions of dollars of investments are happening in this field. Means chip development for AI. In that field, big players are investing huge amount of money. The reason is that definitely the future of the world is based on AI, and if you have an edge over its hardware requirements, that means it's a huge business to be required globally. If you're building a chip that is most efficient, that requirement, the demand for that chip is huge. So it is much beyond our imagination. And I will also introduce certain AI developer boards. Remember that these things are costly due to this hardware acceleration modules inside that. And this one particular one is $150. It is Coral Dev board. It consists of a single board computer with a removable system on module that contains eMMC, SoC wireless radios, and Google TPU. It is a PGA accelerator. Okay, perfect for IoT devices and other embedded systems that demand fast on-device ML inferencing. Remember that it is also used in the case of inferencing. Means the training is done off-shelf compared, with this architecture. And second one is NVIDIA Jetson. It's a very common thing. The price is also low compared to the previous, and it delivers computing performance to run modern AI workloads at unprecedented size, power, and cost. Possible to run AI frameworks and models for applications like image classification, object detection, etc. And its software compatibility is much more broader than the previous. Here, it support TensorFlow Lite. Means TensorFlow is a machine learning framework, Python framework to build machine learning libraries. That is what TensorFlow is. It's been developed by Google. TensorFlow Lite is a version to run in mobile devices and with slow embedded devices. So, in the case of NVIDIA Jetson, it supports TensorFlow as well as PyTorch. PyTorch is to TensorFlow, but it is being developed by Facebook. And Cafe 2, Keras, all these things are Python machine learning libraries. Okay. The last one is Scikit makes go slow. It delivers high performance in a small physical and power footprint, enabling the deployment of high accuracy AI in IoT devices. It is very useful for IoT devices. Reason is that it contains an LCD as well as a length, and also it have a GPU accelerator is there, and it RAM like 8 MB, and software compatibility is also very good. Suppose Tiny YOLO. YOLO is an object detection framework. MobileNet V1, TensorFlow, Free, RTOS, and MicroPython. Okay, with this I would like to finish. If you have any questions, you can ask. I hope it is very useful for you. I know that I have taken only the basics, but I hope it is useful for you.
As participants, if you have any doubts, you can post in the chat.
Okay, I see one question. Can you input audio signals to CNN since it is for image classification? The thing is like, see, you can also visualize the audio as an image, right? I mean, if you do the frequency transform and take the uh, that uh, that weights frequency transform weights, you can still consider it as a matrix. So images means matrix, right? So you can now define a filter, a small filter that spans across a certain frequency range only. So likewise, small filters can be run across this raw audio as well as some transformed, some transforms like Fourier transform as well. Okay.
Yes. Okay. Any other questions? Uh, I think it's okay for all, and we can conclude this session. And now I welcome Mr. Kader A, Principal Engineer of ER&DCIT, to say the word of thanks.
Good evening, good afternoon all. It was a really enriching experience to hear Asif speaking about deep learning and its hardware accelerators. So we learned a lot from you, Asif. Thank you. And it's really wonderful that all these devices are listening to us. They are seeing us, and hope that one day they'll understand us. And thank you, Asif, once again from all of us here at ER&DCIT. We hope that you would associate with us in future also, and for the future coming series. And we would really like to hear from you again. Thank you all. Thank you all participants. We had a really fruitful webinar series, and we have come to the end of it. Thank you all for your participation, and hope that you will participate in future webinars also. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Asif. Thank you, conference, and thank you all.
Thanks for watching. Drop a like, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe.